I get it, you're scrolling through endless specs, watching video after video, and still wondering if you're about to drop a good chunk of cash on a gaming PC that will either sit idle or, worse, struggle when you finally fire it up. You don't want to waste money on the wrong rig, you want something that actually fits your gaming habits, your desk space, and your budget without a nasty surprise a month later. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's cut through the hype and see whether the Skytech Storm really lives up to the promise for people just like you. First off, the Skytech Storm is marketed as a ready-to-play desktop that packs an AMD Ryzen 5 5500 CPU, an RTX 5060 GPU, 16GB of DDR4 RAM and a 1TB NVMe SSD. On paper, those parts sit nicely in the mid-range segment and should handle modern titles at 1080p with decent frame rates. But the real question is how those components translate into everyday use, especially when you factor in the little things that matter most when you're actually sitting down to game after work or on weekends. If you're the type who spends a few hours a week in titles like Valorant, Apex Legends, or Fortnite, you'll notice the Storm hits that sweet spot right away. The RTX 5060 Ti, while not a top-tier card, is more than capable of pushing those games into the 60+ FPS range at high settings. The 8GB of GDDR7 memory isn't a lot by today's ultra-high-resolution standards, but for 1080p and even decent 1440p play it's plenty. What I've heard from owners who actually run the machine is that the gaming-ready label isn't just marketing fluff. They can jump straight into a match without fiddling with driver updates or BIOS tweaks, because Skytech ships the PC with Windows 11 already installed and no bloatware cluttering the drive. Now, let's talk about the SSD and storage. A 1TB NVMe drive loads games in a flash compared to a traditional HDD. If you're the kind of player who likes to keep a library of modern games on hand, you'll appreciate how quickly titles like Cyberpunk 2077 or Elden Ring spin up. The downside? You only get 1TB, which can feel tight if you also store movies, music, or a hefty mod collection. You'll either need to start managing space aggressively or budget for an external drive down the line. The Ryzen 5 5500 is a 6-core, 12-thread processor that offers solid performance for both gaming and the occasional content creation task. It won't beat a Ryzen 7 5800X in raw horsepower, but for the price range it's more than enough to keep frame rates stable when you're running background applications like Discord, a web browser, or streaming software. People who use their PC for heavy video editing or 3D rendering might find the CPU a bit limiting, but if your primary goal is to play and maybe do some light streaming, it hits the mark. One practical strength that often gets overlooked is the inclusion of Wi-Fi 5, 802.11 AC. In many pre-built gaming rigs you're forced to buy a separate network card if you don't want to run an Ethernet cable. With the Storm, you get a decent wireless connection right out of the box, which is a real convenience for anyone living in an apartment or a small room where running cables feels like a chore. The flip side is that Wi-Fi 5 isn't the newest standard. Wi-Fi 6 is already common, and if you have a high-speed internet plan you might not get the absolute fastest wireless speeds. That said, for most gamers the difference won't be noticeable unless you're streaming 4K video while gaming. Cooling is another area where the Storm shows some thoughtfulness. The high-performance air cooler that comes with the build is adequate for the Ryzen 5 5500's thermal envelope. In practice, the system stays reasonably quiet during typical gameplay sessions, and you won't be woken up by a loud fan if you like to game late into the night. However, if you plan to overclock something the system isn't really designed for. You'll likely notice higher temperatures and louder fan noise. In short, it's a good fit for a plug-and-play experience but not a platform for extreme tweaking. So who should actually consider buying this machine? If you're a casual to mid-range gamer who wants a solid, ready-to-go desktop without the hassle of picking out individual parts, the Storm is a strong candidate. It's especially appealing if you're looking to upgrade from an older laptop or a low-end desktop and you want a system that can handle modern esports titles and most AAA games at 1080p with a comfortable frame rate. The included Wi-Fi, Windows 11, and lack of pre-installed junk software make the first boot experience feel polished, which is a big plus for people who don't want to tinker right away. On the other hand, there are clear reasons to walk away. If you're targeting 4K gaming, high refresh rate 1440p monitors, or you intend to run demanding creative workloads, the RTX 5060 Ti and Ryzen 5 5500 will start to feel like bottlenecks. Likewise, if you already have a decent PC and you're only after a miner,